Namaste everyone. Thanks for coming by. My name is Hamsanandi. My name is Ram Prasad, but I am mostly known as Hamsanandi on social media. And I am a student of music. I have learned Carnatic Sangita, and I am a keen listener of both Hindustani as well as some to certain extent of the Western music. Added to that, as almost all Indians are, I'm a fan of lots of filmy music as well. So therefore, I think there is a commonality that between different kinds of music when you see that's performed in a classical platform or whatever we call as classical, right? The Shastriya Sangita form in a concert platform, and then we have the whatever we call as the most more popular forms, such as they may be like filmy music. They may be what we call as in Kannada we call it Sugama Sangita. In Telugu they call it Lalita Sangeetam. In Tamil they call it Mellisai. In English, sometimes they call it light music. I mean, it's not really light in the sense it is easy or anything, but it's just a way of indicating it's somewhat different in how it treats the music versus music and the lyrical elements. So that's the only difference between the so-called light and classical music. But coming to the topic of the day, I set this as what makes a raga different from a scale. You probably would have heard this term if you have learned music. Um, I'm sorry. If you have learned music, you know there are something called raga, which is fundamental to Indian music. Mm. And that you don't see in other forms of music. So if you're reading in English, you will see it as an Indian system as the melodic system versus the Western system they call the harmonic system. So what it means in essence, what it means is in Indian music, whether be it Hindustani or Carnatic Sangita or many of the folk varieties that we have, uh, any vocal music, any instrumental music, it is basically based on a melody, what we call as raga, which is the definition of raga is much more complex than what a simple melody is, but we will just take it on the face value, and then versus in what we call the predominantly Western music, it's harmonic in the sense in they you can see multiple notes being produced at the same time, and where the different notes produced are played or sung at the same time, or having certain kind of relations between them to be harmonious, meaning they having certain frequency relation between them, which makes it easy to hear, easy on your eyes, or pleasurable on your eyes, versus making a noise. Like if a noise, if several people are shouting together, then also it's different sounds coming at the same time. But that is not called harmony. Harmony means it has to have a certain kind of intervals between the various notes that are being sung or played. So that is what makes a harmonic music. But now coming to the basic of Indian music, as I said, it's based on something what we call as raga, which is sort of very um, basic in the sense even when we are even people who do not know what classical music is, they are sort of understanding what raga is, in the sense that it includes a certain different elements within it, and it has a character of its own. And then as a student of music, if you're learning, basically you may be taught that okay, a raga has a scale. For example, if you are going to the first lessons in Karnataka Sangeeta, they will teach you something called Sarale Varse, which are in normally taught to begin with in raga called Maya Malagola. Okay, and then you'll be told that it has a scale of sa, re, ga, ma. pa da ni sa, sa ni da pa ma ga ri sa. And this is we call arohana and avrohana, which is ascending and descending descending notes of a particular raga. And then in the Western music, you probably have heard about major scale, minor scale, those kinds of things, which are also collection of notes. But where a raga becomes different from a scale is when we add certain things called gamaka, which are there in Indian music, which you don't see those kinds of gamaka. Gamaka is a term that we used in Indian languages. It's often called ornamentation in English, which is probably a subset, which describes a subset of the lakshana of the character of a raga. So what I mean to say is, for example, everyone here, I think will know our national anthem, right? Jana Gana Mana. Jana Gana Mana Didinayaka Jaya He. So this is having certain melody, and anything that you sing will have some swaras, some notes behind them. Okay, so if somebody is playing an instrument, if they have to play this Jana Gana Mana, they will play Sari ga 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 ri ga ma. That is what that is how it is written, right? If for someone who is not playing by the ear, you can play by the ear, or you can play looking at a notation. If they are playing at looking at a notation, so that is what they are going to play. But now this is often said, yeah, this is in what is called the Western C major scale, and they say, oh, this is in certain Raga Bilawal or Raga Shankarabharana. So this is where the biggest difference between Indian classical music and the Western music or the other forms of music come into play. Because I'll sing I will sing another line which is in the same raga called Shankarabharana, and then you can see whether there is any relation between this and Jana Gana Mana that I sang just now. Pogadirlo ranga bagilindaಚೆಗೆ ಹೋಗದಿರಲೋ ರಂಗ ಭಾಗವತರು ಕಂಡರೇತಿ ಕೊಂಡೊಯ್ವರೋ ಹೋಗದಿರಲೋ ರಂಗ. So if you see here this and Janagana Manadhinayaka Jaya He, these don't even look like the same, look like not just the same animals, but not even like the animals of the same genus, right? They look so different, so very different. So, but what makes these two so different is what we use in the raga Shankarabharana that is not there in the scale. So, if I just have to say sing the scale of Shankarabharana, scale, right? It will be sa ri ga ma pa da ni sa sa ni da pa ma ga ri sa. These are the plain notes that come in the raga called Shankarabharana, or for to be accurate, we call it the Mela Shankarabharana. In North Indian system, they would call that Bilawal That and not Alaya Bilawal, not as the Raga Alaya Bilawal, but just the Bilawal That. So that has these notes. sa ri ga ma pa da ni sa ni da pa ma ga ri sa. So this actually is quite synchronous to how Jana Gana Mana Adhinayaka Jaya He Bharat Bhagya Vidhata, where all the swaras are sing very very plain without any kind of frills around those. But if I have to actually sing the murchana, murchana is a word for the scale in Indian system, but where we can include the frills or the gamakas that are required for that particular raga. If I have to sing the arohana and avrohana of Shankarabharana with those gamakas, to actually show you how the raga might look like, you have to sing it like Sari Gama Pada Ni Sa Sa Ni Da Pa Ma Ga Ri Sa Poga Di Velo Ganga. Now you can see the Murchana, whatever I sang now, is much closer to how that song, that Pogadiriva Ranga sang, that I sang, it's quite close to that. So what that means is, what made the distinction between the scale of Shankarabharana and the Raga Shankarabharana are these, what we call Gamakas, right? You saw that it is not Sari Gama, but it is Sa Ri Ga Ma Pa Da Ni Sa Sa Ni Ra Pa Ma Ga Ri Sa. So to keep this simple, I'm not going to go in very detail about what kinds of what are these gamakas called. There are and what are those lakshanas, or what it adds to that raga. But it is suffice to know that there are 10 based on different systems. Now we talk about Dashavida Gamaka, we also talk about Dvadashavida Gamaka, and 15, 10, 12 or 15 different types of Gamakas. So these Gamakas are inherent to most of the ragas, and therefore it's possible that two ragas that have the very similar or the same set of notes may actually sound quite different in their treatment. So that is what will makes a raga different from a scale. So if you have listened to lots of movie songs, you and you also happen to know some music, you might have heard that lots of film songs are in Raga Kiravani. But if you look at that, it's probably it's better to state that they are based on the scale of Kiravani. Sa ri ga ma pa da ni sa ni da pa ma ga ri sa. This is how the scale of Kiravani would look like. So this corresponds to I think the Western, I think they call the minor scale. I don't know what minor, maybe C minor or E minor, I don't know. But it corresponds to one of the minor scales. In the Western systems, generally the notes, what we call in Carnatic Sangeeta as like the Shuddha notes, Shuddha Rishabha, Shuddha Daivata, when they are present, they call them as the minor notes. And what we call in Carnatic Sangeeta as Chatushruti Daivata, Chatushruti Rishabha, Antargandhara, but in Hindustani they are all called the Shuddha notes. When they are present, they call them as the major scale or major notes. So lots of Ilayaraja songs are mostly any film song, very famous film song you take. I'm not so. Although I know lots of film songs, nothing comes to my mind immediately. But they are set in this scale called scale of the raga Kirvan. So so now, does just the scale or just the murchana, does it make a raga? It's not that. There are also other elements of a raga that, again, I'm not going into all the different lakshanas that form a raga, just to make, not just to keep it easy for most of the people here. I don't know how many of are musicians here, and how many are like just people who are interested. But there are things like how you open up a raga. What are the opening notes that we call as graha, and what are the how you end, or how you end a sequence of the part of the raga, so that where you can what you call temporarily stand, right? That we call nyasa. And then what is the characteristic note, or combination of notes that characterizes a specific raga, that we call as the amshaswara, or it's also called jiva. And there are other things like how high you can go in that particular raga, and that's called the tara. What is the highest limit, and what is the lower limit? So what it means is, it's possible for someone to sing a raga with the same notes, but differing in how high, how low you can go. For example, I take a very common example. Sa ri ga pa da sa da pa ga ri sa. This is what is called raga mohana. In Hindustani they call it root. So this, I sung the notes plain, because there are certain ragas where you can sing the notes plain, and even with the plain notes, the raga can show up pretty well. These, you can. I don't know whether it is a very traditional definition or not, but you can think it like a scale-based raga. A scale-based raga is one where the form of a raga can show by just singing the scale, right? Even with a plain note, the raga like Shuddha Danyasi, raga like Hindola. I mean, even if not in the full glory of the raga, it's still possible to show a glimpse, or a good amount of the raga with the scale itself. So those are called scale-based raga. But some ragas, it's highly impossible if you sing, particularly if you sing the scale and with plain notes, you are not even, as I said, they are not even in the same room, like the scale of Shankarabharana and the Murchana of Raga Shankarabharana. They are not even close, nowhere close to each other. And if you go to a raga like Anand Bhairavi, or Veeti Gaula, Neelambari, Varali, the scale is totally will be totally misleading you if you just go by the scale. But back to where I was, about how you can how you can by certain, how high you go or how low you go, the change, the treatment of the raga differs, or the name of the raga differs, the character of the raga differs, is by, I was singing the example of sa ri ga pa da sa ri ga pa da sa ri ga sa da sa pa da ga pa ri ga sa da sa ri ga pa da sa da pa da ga सार साक्षी समान रहिता मोहनांगी सदा पालय सार साक्षी समान रहिता मोहनांगी. So if you saw this, you saw that it went over the Tara Shadja. Sa sari ga sada pa gari sada pa. So the range of the raga went somewhere between the Mandra Panchama, the lower octave Panchama, and typically you don't go beyond, just because of the capabilities of the normal people, you normally don't go beyond the Tara Panchama. But there are musicians, there are who have spent their lifetime. They do full 3 octaves, 3.5 octaves, and whatnot. But I'm just talking about the normal people like me. So in the same scale, there is another raga called Pahadi. There is a raga called Pahadi, which primarily goes from the Mandra Panchama to Madhya. It doesn't take the Sancharas above the, generally not above the Shadja, Tara Shadja. So this is the nominal Sanchara of that raga, but that is the range of that, and the because it's generally being a raga more in the folk traditions, it can also take some extra external notes, etc. It's also used in lots of film songs. आजा रे ओ मेरे दिलबर आजा ना 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 ना. So you see, this is how it goes. So the Tara and Mandra being in the Mandra Shajja, Mandra Panchama and Madhya, it's stopping somewhere Madhya and not going beyond the Madhya Panchama, changes the Raga Swarupa into something from what we call as Mohana to what we call Pahadi. And there are other things that will make it Pahadi, make it more Pahadi. But this is just an example to show these are the types of things that will change a scale to a raga. And then also there are things like if you look at raga, like for example, all of you, if you even know even a little classical music, you have heard Yendaro Mahanubhavalu. Like it's in raga called Shri, or you have heard Bhagyada Lakshmi Barama. It's generally sung in this raga Shri. If you look at the nominal scale, it will be given as sa sa re ma pa ni sa sa ni pa da ni pa ma ri ga ri sa. So this is how the scale would be given, but depending on how a particular raga has evolved over the centuries or millennia, it might be so when the actual how the notes actually show up in this particular raga might not reflect how it is shown in the scale. For example, this padani pa, this is a phrase that will not occur in the song or in your exploration of the raga many times. In fact, generally in any raga, in any song in the raga Shri, it will not appear more than once or twice. So is the limit. So it is the alpatva. So it doesn't occur very often. So this is not shown by the scale, but it is shown by the raga swarupa. You will learn that by learning from your guru, learning different compositions in that particular raga. So then when you are trying to elaborate a particular raga, so it is not just just the notes that are there in the murchana, that sa re ma pa ni sa sa ni pa da ni pa ma ri ga ri sa. So that is not it. And then there are also cases where the scale or nominal scale given is almost the same, but because of how the gamakas are utilized in that particular raga, that makes it distinct. Sa re ma pa da sa hai ra pa ma ga ri sa, sa re ma pa da sa hai ra pa ma ga ri sa. This is how a raga called Arabhi, the murchana for the raga, is given. So there is another raga called Deva Gandhari, which is also very similar. If you look at the scale, it might appear to you that it has the same scale, but the treatment of the notes, how it stands on certain notes, how in the raga Arabhi we don't stand on that knee. So the knee is always a fleeting occurrence. Magar is the ga is also very fleeting. You will never be able to magari. You cannot do that because that will actually bring sada pa magari is another raga called sama. Sari ma pada manasa sancharare brahmani manasa magari. So it can stand on that note. That is what is called nyasa. I was talking about before. So if you can do a nyasa on that with the same given swaras, with the same scale, it develops into what we call sama. While if it's given a fleeting treatment, then it is a raga called Arabi. Then you might ask, why so much complication? It's not a complication, it's just the evolution. So we just cannot ask why why a sparrow has sparrow is a small bird and while an ostrich is a big bird. Why some birds can fly much faster, and this type of questions, right? It's all a function of their how they have evolved over the millennia. So similarly, how our ragas have evolved is also over a period of time. So there were ragas that were. Let me give a little more introduction into ragas. The term called raga has several meanings. It can mean color. Um, uh, it can mean the melody that we are talking about. The definition is ranjayati iti ragaha, meaning one that entertains, one that brings you up, right? That is what is raga. So it's not really telling about what it is, but in a musical context, if you go 2000 years ago, at the time of when Bharata wrote his Natya Shastra, we did not have this term called raga, but there were similar things what that they called jati. And the system of music at that point of time was a bit different with what they call grama system of music, where it wasn't necessary for all the songs to be all the ragas to be sung in a given octave or given pitch that we are used to now. So a certain ragas would be sung in only certain grama or frame of reference. So there was something called Shadja Grama, there was something called Madhyama Grama, and there was also something called Gandhara Grama. These different kinds of references, where the difference between the notes was identified as a given amount, and they differed between the different gramas. I mean, let's not go deep into that, but just suffice to know it evolved from something called jati that was there, jatis that were there, gramas and jatis that were there 2000 years ago, and then over time they developed into what we call ragas. The earliest reference to raga comes from a text in the 7th century or 6th century. Brihadeshi of Matanga is where we find the definition of raga, and after that we see it develop in Sangeeta Ratnakara and all other texts, where it is given the whole body treatment that I talked about, the nyasa, panyasa, mandra, tara, and the different kinds of gamakas that come along to ragas, right? The gama, when I said gamakas are not just ornamentation, it is because of this. What are gamakas? If sa ri ga pa da sa, here I'm singing plain notes. Sa ri ga pa da sa. You can see there is an oscillation going on. Oscillation about the notes. I'm sorry, just give a second. So there is an oscillation about sari, So the re is actually not re. It sounds like more like sa re ga re ga re. So that is how it sounds. Now, if you are actually playing an instrument, you will see that you are not keeping your finger on the fret at a given place, but you are actually moving between two notes. So that is one type of gamaka, what we call as kampita. Another type of kampita is sa sa ni da ma ga sa sa ni da ma ga sa. This is how typically, if you are a Hindustani listener, you would have noticed this. Yesterday somebody asked me this question. There was a Malcolm's room going on, and I entered that, and there were lots of good singers over there, and then they asked me if I can sing something in Malcolm's. I said, "No, I'm going to sing something in Hindola, which is an equivalent raga for Malcolm's," and I sang a composition of Mysore Vastevacharya. And somebody asked me, what is the difference between these two? I mean, they have the same swara sampatti, or the inherent notes over there. Sa ga ma da ni sa ni da ma ga sa. This is how that raga Malcolm's or Hindola goes. So, but what makes it Hindola, what makes it Malcolm's is the choice of the types of gamakas that are used. Some gamakas are used more in Carnatic Sangeeta, some are used more in Hindustani Sangeeta. So these two were actually the same music, right? That's a big history. I don't want to get into that, but a single stream of music with regional variants. Now, with a country like India, which is so big, there are obviously would be different variations even when it was a single system of music. But after like 12th, 13th century, there was a marked shift between how they split into two forms, with certain type of ragas and gamakas getting an upper hand in the north, and certain others getting upper hand in the south. So that is what now they look like they are two different different forms of music if you are not very much aware. But if you go a little deeper into that, you will see that they are one and the same. So now coming to what made that scale, sa ga ma da ni sa ni da ma ga sa. This is a plain note that I sang. It doesn't really give you a good sense of the raga. But if I'm singing in Carnatic Sangeeta, I might sing it like Sma Mavatu Shri Saraswati Kama Koti Pitha Vasini Mamavatu Shri Saraswati Nini da 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 ni sa da ni ga da ni sa da da ni sa ma da ni sa ga ma da ni sa. This is how it goes. Versus if in the treatment in Hindustani, you'll see more of what we call as the jaru. It's not as though the jaru is absent in Karnataka Sangeeta, but it's just more in Hindustani. Sa ni da ma ga sa. This is how they take it, and in fact, even in Karnataka Sangeeta, no, there are compositions which are using this format. For example, even Muthuswami Dikshita's Neerajakshi Kamakshi, if you look at the notation or the way he envisioned it, is more like this: Neerajakshi Kamakshi Neerada Chikure Tripure, with an excess of, I would say, the Jaru Gamakas. Jaru means slide, so that in Hindustani they call it meaned. Banina anchinda bande, bali bande, ಬೆಳಕನ್ನು ಚೆಲ್ಲುತ್ತಾ ಉದಯ ರಾಗ ಹಾಡುತ್ತಿರಲು ಬಾನಿನ ಅಂಚಿಂದ ಬಂದೆ ಬಳಿ ನಿಂದೆ. So this is how, I just gave that example of a movie song. Just because in many movie songs you will see, even in South India, many of the songs are given a bit of a North Indian or Hindustani kind of touch. So similarly is another raga called, very famous raga called Yaman or Kalyan. The way we sing here in Carnatic Sangeeta, Sar Sari Ga Ma Pada Ni Sa Sa Ni Ra Pa Ma Ga Ri Sa Ye Ta O Na Ra Ni La Ga Da Ni So this is how you will see a typical Kalyani in Karnataka Sangeeta. While the with the same set of notes, the Hindustani people will make it as Ni Re Ga Ma Da Ni Sa Sa Ni Da Pa Ma Ga Re Pa Re Sa Re Pa Re. See the jaru there over there. It's the same set of notes, but it's giving a different flavor to the raga. So that is why something a song can be set in Yemen, or song can be set to be in Kalyani or Yemen. I'll give, for example, um, a couple of Kannada songs which are more Kalyani-ish and from the popular music, and which are more Yemenish. Mm, ಹೊಸಬಾಳಲ್ಲಿ ಹೊಸಬಾಳಿನ ಹೊಸಿಲಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಂತಿರುವ ಹೊಸ ಜೋಡಿಗೆ ಶುಭವಾಗಲಿ, ಹೊಸ ಆಸೆಯ ಕಡಲಲ್ಲಿ ತೇಲುತಿಹ ನವ ಜೋಡಿಗೆ ಸುಖವಾಗಲಿ. So this is what this is more of the Kalyani flavor. While ಮತ್ತದೇ ಬೇಸರ ಅದೇ ಸಂಜೆ ಅದೇ ಏಕಾಂತ ನಿನ್ನ ಜೊತೆ ಇಲ್ಲದೆಯೇ ಮಾತಿಲ್ಲದೆ ಮನವಿಭ್ರಾಂತ, ಮತ್ತದೇ ಬೇಸರ ಅದೇ ಸಂಜೆ ಅದೇ ಏಕಾಂತ. So this one is, if you listen to it, you'll say this is set in Yemen, not in Kalyani. So that sort of illustrates why certain gamakas, the presence or absence of certain elements, will change it from a raga to one raga to another, and also one raga to a non-raga. So if somebody sings very plain notes, it may not seem like any raga at all. Sa ri ga ma pa da ni sa sa ni da pa ma ga ri sa. If I try to sing some song with this kind of with devoid of any ornamentation, very plain, it will not sound like the raga Kalyani. Sometimes you might see infusion, etc. If somebody is playing a Western guitar, etc., they might be playing the plain notes. It works well as a fusion, etc. However, it actually fails to give the complete character of a a raga. So with that, I think I didn't have a specific plan on what to cover, but I just spoke extempore on what all came to my mind, assuming that this will be sort of interesting to people. And I see many performing musicians in here. I'm so overwhelmed to see so many musicians in the audience. Ramnath ji, Perumal ji, Anirudh. I may be missing many people. I may not know personally. I'm mentioning only some people only because I know I have met them in other rooms, and I know they are performing artists. Dr. Manorama, and then I see Sri Keremane Hegde also. Namaskara, sir. They're all artists of the very tall order, and I think I'm blessed to see them in this room. And I keep this. I'll keep this open now for anyone to ask any questions, and I'll try to answer within my capability. And if you have any comments or any observations that you want to add, they are welcome too.
Hello, sir. Thank you for having this very nice and an interesting beginner tool for those who love to appreciate ragas and also Hindustani thought in a better way. So I have several questions if we may go through it. So the first one is, if we listen to Jugalbandi, what I understand about Jugalbandi, it's kind of a way to see or to really understand how Raga and also Tat or the Hindustani, but not versus Hindustani and Carnatic work together. So can we see the sorts of differences or the sorts of diversity of Raga and Tat through Jugalbandi?
Yeah, it is possible. And what they do normally is whenever the format of Jugalbandi itself makes it a bit restricted for both sides. The reason being, there are some ragas that are very specific to Hindustani and that do not have their comparables in Carnatic Sangeeta, and vice versa. Or there are ragas that are considered very major in Hindustani, but they are made into a light ragas. For want of a better word, light ragas are fit for singing very like small compositions in Carnatic Sangeeta, and vice versa. And then that is what will actually limit the in a jugalbandi what can be sung. So people generally tend to sing when they are singing. They do not want to sing two totally different ragas together, right? It doesn't give you a wholesome feeling. So what they do is they pick up a raga like Malkaus and Hindola. They are pretty much they are, for example, they are like 95% same, or at least 85% same. But notes wise they are 100% same, but treatment wise they are like 85% same. So they generally pick up ragas like Malkaus or Yaman that are very common and very well known in both. Sometimes they also take the ragas that have been taken from one side to the other. For example, they'll take raga like Kiravani, Simhendra Madhyama, Charukeshi. These are all taken from Karnataka Sangeeta into Hindustani. So Hindustani has developed certain characteristics to show the distinctness, and that is something that they take and perform in a Jugalbandi. The other is the ragas that have been taken from Hindustani to Karnataka Sangeeta, like Behar or what we call Hamir Kalyani, that they call Kedar. They are very pretty much identical. Behar and then Janjoti. What they call Janjoti is very similar to what we call Kamboji. We have something called Janjoti that has been taken from them probably, but we have given it a totally different color by making it, as I was mentioning, how the raga, some of the ragas may not go above certain range, right? The upper limit and the lower limit. Our Janjoti doesn't go beyond the Madhya Panchama. So, with given all this criterion, what happens in a Jugalbandi is both the artists are limited by what seems to be number one palatable to both the audience and is harmonious to sing together. With this, what happens is a very major raga, for example, like Miya Malhar, that cannot be sung because that Miya Malhar is not a big thing in Karnataka Sangeeta. So we cannot sing something like Todi, what we call Todi in Karnataka Sangeeta, because there is no parallel to it in Hindustani Sangeeta. We cannot sing a major raga like Bhairavi, which is not there in Hindustani Sangeeta. But we can sing like Purya Dhanashri because they call it Purya Dhanashri, we call it Kamavardhini or Pantvarali. So therefore, the artist would be limited on the choice of what they can perform in a Jugalbandi.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. This is the last question.
Sure.
So you said that there are some distinct elements that divide one raga to another or one raga to the other rag.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, the gamak, the ornamentations, or maybe the higher and lower, where we can get for each raga. Or maybe in Western they call it scale, minor or major. So I'd say just now you sing Maila Malagala, first one and one. Although the notes are same, but maybe the scale differs, right?
Mm-hmm.
other differences that
Uh,
we bring? So we can see the same notes, but the difference that we can see other kind of difference that
other
may separate or
um,
may distinctly. Yeah.
yeah, for example, the characteristic phrases, sometimes, let's say, mm, mm, I'm just thinking what example that I can give you to show this. Mm, so, I think in Hindustani, for example, there are ragas like Sohini and mm, Marwa, etc., which are Sari Ga Ma Da Ni Sa Za Ni Da Ma Ga Ri Sa. So while this is the scale for all of them, how you take the raga Ni Ri Ga Ma. Uh, Please give me 1 second. So, Nirigama, and then the prominence where you halt will change. What is called the nyasa can change it from Puriya to Marwa to Sohini. So this is one example. And the other example is, for example, in the raga, like just now I mentioned, right, Arabhi and Sama. Arabhi is generally mm, Sari ma pada sa sai da pa ma ga re sa. And there are compositions where the note ni is completely absent. Sari ma pada sa da pa sa da pa ma ga re. That is also possible in RP. The ni sa da pa ma ga re sa. That's possible, but it doesn't stand on that note called ga. While in the same with the same murchana, the raga called sama, sadapa magari sa, it stands on that, gives a nyasa on that note. So that is what makes the difference between the treatment of Arabi and sama. And similarly, I mentioned about Devagandhari, right, which also has the similar scale. Kshira pa magari Mapada sanira pamagari. So this will make it sound like Devgandhari. So these are all. Sometimes what happens is these ragas develop in different geographical areas and then come together, and they figure out, okay, there is a they are sometimes they are even called by the same name, and then they'll sort of add an adjective to that and call it like a distinct raga. For example, there is something called Kamboji, which is very famous, and then there is also a raga called Erukala Kamboji or Yadukulu Kamboji. Apparently, this Yadukala Kamboji was a folk raga which was developed, which was sung by a tribe called Yerukalas, and it's very similar to Kamboji, but the treatment, the pace is somewhat different. So hence it's developed into, when it was assimilated into classical fold, it was called, it was given another name, and many composers have composed in it has developed its own character, so to say, distinct from the other. I hope I at least partly answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, but I just wondered, like, when we have this kind of distinct forms and also beauty of each ornamentations or kind of treatment for each raga, when we switch it or just mold it slightly, it would go into different raga or system altogether.
Mm-hmm.
But then, what makes it mendable? So what I mean is, so if a raga have its own rules and also own ornamentation or own high and lows. So, but we can see the diversity also there. It is not limited to that, but at the same time, it can flourish in the same raga. what makes it to survive, although it is governed by all these unwritten rules.
Generally, I think even though they are like a human species, ragas also evolve over time. So these rules get written after some changes come in. Basically, every now and then, the text writers, right, musical text writers would say this is how this raga is to be sung, etc., etc., based on how it was sung in the past or in their time. And they also notice changes that keep occurring, and sometimes they might say, oh, okay, this should not be done, and this is how it should be done, etc. But however, things will change. Things will change over time, and then at some point of time there will be a course correction, and then say, okay, this is like the traditional way, and this is the new way. And sometimes they do it by giving a new name, or they will give they'll do it by distinguishing it with a prefix to the raga. For example, in Karnataka Sangeeta today you have a raga called Saveri. You also have a raga called Shuddha Saveri. The Raga Saveri, the scale would go something like this. Mm, Sari ma pa da sa sa ni da pa ma ga re sa. This is Saveri. While the Shuddha Saveri, that's popularly known, is Sari ma pa da sa sa da pa ma re sa. So this is how it is. And these are, if you observe, you see the notes are entirely different. Meaning, the leaving out the sa and pa, uh, sa and pa and ma, the re and za, the other two notes that are that are important in this raga, are different between Saveri and Shuddha Saveri. But why Shuddha, if you know, means pure in most Indian languages, or Samskrita, which is also used in other languages. So the Shuddha, so does the Shuddha Saveri today, does it mean it is pure? In what way it is pure? So if you look at the history, it becomes apparent. Basically, what happened was at some point of time, the Raga Saveri was something like this. Sari ma pa da sa sa da pa ma re sa. This is how I know 1,000 years ago maybe, I don't know exactly, but that is how this Raga Saveri would have was. And due to the changes in time, or whatever evolution, so due to different prayogas, different musicians, and the swaras ni and ga started creeping in the avaroha. Sari ma pa da sa sa ni da pa ma ga re sa. So the ni and da kept came into the raga called Saveri. So then at the same time there were two different ragas with the same name, right? One without ni and ga, and one with ni and ga. So what they did was they called the raga without the ni and ga as Shuddha Saveri, because it was the previous form of Saveri. So it became Sari ma pa da sa sa da pa ma re sa. This became Shuddha Saveri, and Sari ma pa da sa sa ni da pa ma ga re sa. This became Shuddha Saveri. However, what happened is, during again at some later point of time, both the re and da in this raga started going up for whatever reason, we don't know. So then the form of that raga Shuddha Saveri became sa re ma pa da sa sa da pa ma re sa. So now the raga, and there was also another raga called Devakriya with this very similar kind of murchana. So we see that in Tyagaraja's compositions, Dari ni te lo su konti, and so on and so forth. The raga is called Shuddha Saveri. And Dikshitar Sri Guru Guhapalaya Shuma Sharavana Bhava, with the same very similar murchana, with a very minor difference. So he calls it Devakriya. And they and Dikshita, because he was a more traditional oriented, or whatever, and however you want to call that, he called the raga Sari Ma Pada Sa Sa Da Pa Ma Re Sa. He called it Shuddha Saveri, and he composed in that too. Kamresha Naike Shireka. So this is what he has called Shuddha Saveri. So now in the 20th century, what happened was there were two Shuddha Saveris, one with Sari Ma Pa Da Sa Sa Da Pa Ma Re Sa, and the other with Sari Ma Pa Da Sa Sa Da Pa Ma Re Sa Da Pa Ma Re Sa. So there, and in music academy they had some discussions, and they said, okay, they will prefix the Dikshita's Shuddha Saveri with the word Karnataka, and they called it Karnataka Shuddha Saveri. So you'll see that as in many places as called as Karnataka Shuddha Saveri. So these are more of the evolution question of the ragas. Welcome, Ramakrishnan ji.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hamsanandi. May I ask a question?
Please go ahead. I don't know whether I will be able to answer.
No. This is actually trying to explore your comparison with evolution and of the raga development, analogous to evolution. And in evolution, you have, natural selection where certain types have more fitness in a Darwinian sense, meaning that they are more successful in their environment. So what I wanted to know is, if you take, for example, the Melakatta framework, which we know has been retrofitted, and you look at certain chakras, like let's say the chakra where Varali exists, which you gave an example of Varali before.
Yep.
Why is it the Janavarali raga, the raga associated with that scale, has become so much more popular than any of the other ragas in that chakra, whether it's Salagam or Janarnavam or Pavani or anything. There is, for example, in a different chakra, the chakra where you have Hemavati, Dharmavati, Simhendra Madhimam, several of those ragas are popular.
Yeah.
Do you think it's primarily the first half, the Purvangam, that determines the success and the popularity of a cluster of ragas? I'm just trying to figure out what it is that made Varali more successful than its companions in that chakra of 6. Because if you hear you don't expect Sa, you only expect the Varali, the rest of Varali. So what makes some ragas much more successful, if you will, in a sort of selection or cultural evolution sense? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. It's a quite thought-provoking question. I think there are several interesting elements behind this. One is we don't know why certain ragas got into what, but Varali, for that matter, is one of the very ancient ragas that we have. In fact, it's probably more than 1,000 years. It's probably from Sangeeta Ratnakara times. It has not changed. And actually, the Prati Madhyama was called the Varali Madhyama in earlier times because probably Varali was the only main raga that had Prati Madhyama that was being used. Might be that it's in many texts it's called as Varali Madhyama. So and then coming to why certain notes are certain ragas get popularity, it's I think because how our ear perceives the intervals. Naturally, what we call as the Vivadi ragas, right, Vivadi chakras, or have what we call lesser appeal, so to say, except for this example of Varali. Maybe because even being a Vivadi, Varali and Nati, both, right? Both of these have Vivadi elements, but they have stayed in popularity for very, very long time. Because it's a question of chicken and egg, right? If there is if something gets popular, somebody will compose in it, somebody will perform it, and it gets heard more. Therefore, people will associate with it, and so on. Therefore, it will stay in the people's mind. versus something that's for example after the Melakarta was retrofitted and then they came up with Salagam or Jalarnavam. I mean, musically, the Jalarnavam may not be very different from Varali, but in the presence of Varali, that is already popular, that is already a wholesome raga, so to say, which has developed into a full feature animal. A Jalarnava or Salaga Raghupriya next to that, which is more like unfinished product, right? With very few compositions, it gives a limited scope for elaboration for performers. I think that's one of the reasons why a less number of they have not become very popular. But coming to why these formulated melas like Hemavati, Dharmavati, they are popular, that is something that we can answer very easily because those intervals are more pleasant to our ears. So that is why the chakras from of Karara Priya and Shankarabharana, and on this side in that Shanmukha Priya and Kalyani. So those ragas, even though they did not exist before and they came after the Melakarta scheme was put in, um, they have gained sufficient popularity, and they have found both listeners as well as performers, and they have been attractive to composers. Having said all this, in ragas during their evolution, sometimes they come into war, they go out of war. It is, I think, there is some element of unpredictableness over there too. So because some ragas that were very popular at some point of time are hardly heard now, and because of could be two or three reasons. One is another raga which is similar to that came in and sort of replaced it. And this one we can say in, for example, in a raga like Shuddha Vasanta, which was quite well known, but later on something like Kannada, right? Kannada, the raga Kannada replaced it because the elements of the raga, the treatment of the raga is similar. For whatever reason, Kannada might have replaced Shuddha Vasanta. So very similarly, I can cite another example like Samanta, the raga Samanta, which was very popular. Apparently, it has like hundreds or maybe even I don't know thousands of compositions of Annamaya listed as in raga Samanta in the Tirupati manuscripts, copper plates. It may not be thousands, but literally hundreds. So that Raga Samanta, which was a mela, and then it was very popular in like 15th, 16th centuries. It has totally gone off the table. Maybe because some of the elements of that are absorbed in Nilambari, and now many of the elements of Raga Samanta are in the neo-popular Raga Tilang. So therefore, and then there are other elements like how some Medhavi performer or composer can bring out a raga out of oblivion. Tyagaraja composed so many compositions, right? Many of them were almost unheard. But for example, the composition Enta Muddo Enta Sogoso, which wasn't heard so much earlier, I think after View Srinivas played it and made it popular, it's become very very common, and anybody with little music knowledge now say, oh, this is Bindu Malini, just because there's that familiarity. So it's not just so that has got shot into fame in the last 50 years. Even ragas like Ranjani, I think they were not sung so much in the earlier part of 20th century. This is what I have heard, but they are very, very. It's very popular now. Similarly, some ragas like I have heard raga like Balahamsa and Kapi Narayani. These were all very popular in the before 1950s, and they have sort of lost some of the popularity. So I think it's a question of how somebody can make a composition. We all know like Devadi Deva became so popular just because of Balmurdi Krishna singing it, and sort of he made it his own composition, Devadi Deva and Nagumomu and so on, right? So it's always possible for a Medhavi performer to sort of tilt the favor towards a raga. But we don't know in the history how many times those kinds of things might have happened, but I'm sure they would have.
Yeah. Yeah. this is very, very insightful. Just one final question, going back to what makes a raga different from a scale. There are certain ragas, I mean the five-note ragas like Mohanam or Hindolam or Shuddha
Yep.
where even if the raga is rendered, by let's say a beginner in the context of a Geetam like Varavina or so on and so forth,
Yep.
it's easily identifiable as
Raga. Yeah.
the raga, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas something else like Ananda Bhairavi and Kamala Slochana rendered without any gamakas is
Yeah.
barely recognizable as Ananda Bhairavi.
Yeah.
Would you say for beginner, like someone who's learning music, that it would be better to just stick with before they get to the stage of learning about the different gamakas, etc. In terms of just teaching, would you think it's better to just stick with ragas who have some degree of identifiability just based on scale alone, minus the gamakas? What are your thoughts on studying music and teaching music?
Yeah, I think I mentioned about this too earlier about some ragas being recognizable even without the gamakas like Mohana, Hindola, Shuddha, etc., etc. I call them like the scale-based ragas, for want of a better word. Yeah, I think it is probably appropriate, and if you think if you look at it, many of our early lessons, even Kamala Jadala, Kalyani, right? It can be sung in with very limited gamakas and still show the Kalyani. And same with Anna Lekara, etc. I know apart from Kamala Sulochana, which is slightly hard to identify with today's Ananda Bhairavi. All other initial lessons that are commonly taught are easy, right? Even the Radhavenu Gopabala. I mean, although it's without gamakas, it's not best, but it sort of survives. The Bilahari in it survives even with the least amount of gamakas. I would think that is how it's been formulated. And in case of Kamala Salochana, I think the reason why it also sounds strange is because of the archaic prayogas that are not there, that are not used today, right? Just the opening the nisa sa. So how often do you use nida nisa? It's very very less, right? So that is also probably throws most people off the Ananda Bhairavi track, and we are used to more of the and also the occasional antargandharas, which to sort of like the key to open the Ananda Bhairavi vault.
Yeah, right. In fact, I think some musician who's recorded a bunch of lessons has changed Nida Nisa to Pada Pasa, but even then it's not really recognizable as Ananda Bhairavi.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much, Hamsanandi ji, for your insights and reflections.
Thank you,
Much appreciated.
Thank you, Ramkrishnan ji. Yeah, I think I would say just coming to those compositions, I think we shouldn't go about changing them because they are like a time capsule. So even if they are not current today, but I think we should still, for the history's sake, right? We should keep singing with how it was. I know it's okay not to do that during our elaboration of the raga, etc. But for that particular composition or any of the compositions which have these archaic prayogas, it's always best to keep them. And I think many varnas, when people compose, they will look at these archaic prayogas and include them. At least I have tried to do that in some cases.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks, sir.
If anyone else wants to have any other discussion, question, please come up. You can raise your hands and.
So I have just a couple of points to just elaborate on your answer, Samsanadiji.
Okay, sure.
So Ramakrishnan sir asked about the Jala Varali and why Varali is more popular, whereas its Janya Ragam is not as much popular. So you did mention about the Vivadi nature of these ragams.
Yep.
So that is one of the reasons. Now, of course, we do have some genius and very accomplished musicians like Balamurali sir or Tanjore Kalyanaraman who have, sung every kind of Melakarta Ragam, every kind of Vivadi Ragam, and even sung Ragatanam Pallavis in those, which other singers would hesitate from touching. The reason is because the Vivadi Swarams are basically just a different, what to say, nomenclature for an already existing and more popular Swaram. So it is kind of weird for the singers to elaborate on that, or it's challenging is the word, not more than weird, challenging is the word, more challenging and more difficult. But if you listen to the records of these yesteryear greats, you can see that they've effortlessly done that, and it takes a lot of technical brilliance and kind of deep knowledge to do that. That is one point. And the other restricting part of why the Janaka Ragams themselves are not as popular or cannot be made popular is because it's because they're perfect in the nature that it's a full Milakartam and that. And the Janya Ragams is kind of more easier with more flexibility to maneuver is what I feel when it comes to these Vivadi Ragams. And of course, your concept or your thought process that the retrofitting of the Ragams happened after Venkatamaki's initial Mela scale and all that. So that is another concept of it. Now there are some Ragams like Varali or Natikuranji or all these Ragams which are very ancient, Bhairavi. So the compositions have already existed in them. So traditionally speaking, from a traditional sense, these Ragams are more popularized, and there is nothing further research required, or there is already a structure or something. Whereas when it comes to Ajala Varali, there is no prior reference, or there is no kind of a large number of compositions where you can refer and you can try to elaborate on their structure. So it takes more difficulty and more technical brilliance to do it on your own, which not everyone is capable, or not everyone has attained that level of technicality. So that is one thing. Now the second thing which I wanted to just elaborate, you talked about Sri Rag. Now, as you said, the Ragams have been evolving over periods of time. So Ragams also are presented or composed differently by different composers. Sri Ragam is an example where if you look at the Tyagaraja Swami school of music, the Ragam is basically Sari Ma Pa Ni Sa Sa Ni Pa Ma Re Ga Re Sa. There is no Daivata Prayogam at all. If you look at any Tyagaraja Kriti, there will not be any Daivata Prayogams.
Of course.
But in other schools, there will be Daivata Prayogams. So again, the school of music where it was composed also plays an effect on what are notations in the Ragam. That is one point which I wanted to highlight.
Oh, sure, thanks. Actually, yeah, I mean, coming to Vivadis, and can they be popular? Of course, they can be, and yeah, it's all a question of the capability of the musician, and also how the notes are treated. I think why Varali is more palatable than some other thing that goes Sarigama is because right in the Varali grammar we have Sariga. So all these gamakas defined so well, and sort of actually they take away any of the chromatic or the rivadi element in the raga. So that is how, if you look at any of the Dikshita's compositions, right? Any of these in the 72 system, whenever he has composed something like in Rasamanjari, or any of these Vivadi, what we call Vivadi, he has, you can see that it's always Saga, Riga, or Sanipa. So he will skip the Daivata, he will skip the Vivadi note in ascent or descent. So, and he will introduce Sapamapa, so he will Sapamapa, Danisa, so he will create some sort of this type of sancharas. He has not created, basically these are all given by Muddu Venkatamaki even before him. He only created the Lakshya. So hence, and that's it was an effort to make those ragas more pleasant to listen to. So that was the reason. And of course there are artists who have done that. And sometimes you also see some compositions which are done in a very plain Sarigama Padanisa Sanida Pamagarisa Sanchara. That doesn't always work. If you look at any of the real ragas, right, if you might have Todi or Kalyani, if you look at it, how often do you sing it plain straight? Ramapadani sa na na da madani sada gari sani sada padani sada pa maga mada dani sani gari sani da pa. So this is why we get that wholesome picture instead of all the time going up and down the scale. So that's one of the points. The other point you mentioned was about the some ragas being ancient and therefore having an advantage. Yes, that is true. But as I pointed, some ancient ragas that had lot of advantage, for whatever reason, they have gone off our radar. We just can't. I mean, we just don't know, right? It's like some movie is very good, but it bombs at the box office, and something that's not so good will stay on, right? It gets very popular for whatever reason. I know it's just people like it, and I know people forget some of the things. So it is true that the ragas like Nata, Varali, Nata Koranji is not that old compared to Varala Nata, Mohana, Revagupti. Shankarabharana is also pretty old. So Velavali is old. So these ragas are old and they have stayed their course. But if you see, the stature given to those ragas was different. Like for example, 500 years ago, to Shankarabharana, Ramamatya calls it a minor raga. Okay, he classifies as Uttama, Adhama, Madhyama, three types of ragas. And Shankarabharana, now what we can consider as the Raga Raja, right? So he calls it as a Adhama Raga or Madhyama, probably Adhama Raga, meaning it's not fit. It's a raga that is fit for small compositions. And even for Kalyani, Venkatamiki says Turushkana Mati Priyaha. They are popular for Pamara people, meaning not for learned people. He doesn't even describe. He says ragas like this is the phrase ragas like Kalyani and Pantuvarali. There are crores of them, which are Pamaranam Atipriyaha. I'm not going to describe them. So basically, he takes a high pedestal, saying, okay, there are ragas like this, but I'm not going to describe because they're not fit for my description. But you see how Kalyani took over, right? How Kalyani took over in 1 century, right? 1650 is when probably Venkatamaki wrote this, and 1750 Tyagaraja was born, and Tyagaraja himself has composed like 30 kritis. And you just don't know how many kritis in Kalyani are there now. It's probably the more. If you look at both people who know music and don't know music, and if you make them listen to Kalyani, definitely they will sort of among 10 different songs, they are very likely to sort of pick a raga like Kalyani or Mohana as their favorite, right? So it has that kind of appeal. But it was considered, not so great raga at one point of time. That's what I'm just trying to comment. And what was the last point you said? I forgot. I forgot my train of thoughts.
Even I have forgotten. I don't know. I think you covered everything.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Yeah, I think you spoke about composing, right? Yeah. I think one point. What I wanted to tell you was that these ragas were were not just fitted; they were actually created to fit those places. Uh, when the Mela scheme was done, right? There were Venkatamaki is not the only Mela scheme maker. There were other Mela schemes before. There was a framework of 960 Melas given by one Shastrakara. There was a system of 90 Melas done by another Shastrakara called Pandarika Vithala. It was just like 100 years before Venkatamaki. Venkatamaki came and said 72 based on the permutations and combinations. The 90 is also based on permutation and combination, but it uses in place of Shuddha Madhyama, he calls it Urdhva Gandhara. So he actually used that to include ragas that has two Madhyamas, what we call as two Madhyamas today, as he considered one as Gandhara and other as Madhyama. So he called it Urdhva Gandhara, and thus he created a system of 90 melas that didn't actually catch up. But the 72 mela caught up in 17th century. there, and he says, 19 are Purva Prasiddha Melas, and I have created a raga called Simharava, and this will fall in the 58th place. That's all. And he says, okay, the musicians of future will actually find ragas that will fit in here, and that was what exactly was um, done by the later day musicians. After all, Mela is what? Mela is a meeting point, right? It's a collection, it's a group. So Mela is just a group of notes, group of swaras. It does not have raga by itself. So hence, Mela raga is a kind of inconsistent name, but it has stayed on, right? Instead of Sampurna raga, we have called it Mela raga, but that is what it is. Yeah. Thank you. So if any of you want to add anything, have any questions, please let me know. Namaste ji, Namaste Vani ji, Namaskara Vani avare. I see you here. Thanks a lot for being here.
Namaste, sir.
Namaste, namaste.
Sir,
ಹೇಳಿ.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಸೋ ಮಚ್ ಸರ್. ಖುಷಿ ಆಯ್ತು ತುಂಬಾ. ಎಲ್ಲ ಕೇಳ್ಕೊತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ಆಕ್ಚುಲಿ ಕಿಚನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ತುಂಬಾ ಖುಷಿ ಆಯ್ತು ಸರ್.
ನಿಮ್ಮಂತ ದೊಡ್ಡ
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ಸ್ ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು ಸರ್. ನಾವು ಪುಣ್ಯ ನಾನು ಅದೇ ಅನ್ಕೊಂತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ, ಕ್ಲಬ್ ಹೌಸ್ ಇಂದ ಎಷ್ಟು ಯೂಸ್ಫುಲ್ ಆಗಿದೆ ಕ್ಲಬ್ ಹೌಸ್ ಅಂತ. ತುಂಬಾ ಖುಷಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಸರ್ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ಕೊತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ.
ನಿಮ್ಮಂತ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಕಲಾವಿದ್ರು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಹಿಂಗ್ ಬಂದಿರೋದು ನನಗೆ ಬಹಳ ಸಂತೋಷ.
ಸರ್ ನಾನ್ ತುಂಬಾ ಚಿಕ್ಕವಳು ಸರ್, ನೀವು ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಡಿ, ನೀವು ದೊಡ್ಡವರು. ತುಂಬಾ ಖುಷಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಇದು ಇದೇ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ನಂಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ ಸರ್. ಇದು ಯಾವಾಗ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಸರ್? ಡೈಲಿ ಇರುತ್ತಾ ಅಥವಾ?
ಇಲ್ಲ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಸುಮ್ನೆ ಇವತ್ತು ಇದ್ದಕ್ಕಿದ್ದಾಗೆ ಮಾಡಿದೆ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ಹೀಗೆ ಒಂದೊಂದ್ಸಲ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರ್ತೀನಿ ಅಷ್ಟೇ.
ಓಕೆ ಓಕೆ ಸರ್.
Arvind, would you like to speak up?
Yeah, good morning, guys. Sir, actually, let me just start by saying that I found your documentation of Kalyani very interesting. Like, Pamananam Adikpriya. So, that was it was very surprising to me. But I think that Kalyani that was referred by him, how much it actually resembles the current Kalyani, that also we might have to look into. Whether it's possible to look into is another thing. Because what I feel is on this topic, Melakarta, as you told previously, Melakarta, that scale, that system, it's not exactly a raga system. You cannot pick one of them. Let's say Dhira Shankarabharanam. You cannot say that's a raga. The raga is Shankarabharanam. So it's
Very
like
correct,
backfitting.
Very right. Yeah, very right.
So it's like Shankarabharanam, or like it's just a label, right? So Shankarabharanam, it has already existed with all its melodies and all its prayogas. So basically, how he could have done that was probably he got the scale system. So from all the possible permutations and combinations of all the possible varieties of the swaras of just the note positions, and he named it after the most popular raga in each category. Exactly. And also he had to append the Katapayadi, that scheme also to fit into it, and it was more like a backfitting system. Actually the naming itself, I think it's a bit problematic, because the Janya Janaka, right? So actually it's the other way around, if you look at it in many cases.
I hear you. I mean, basically, I know if you're there, and it's backfitting, and also I agree. I always try to call when I'm talking about this Mela system, I'll say Dhira Shankarabharana Mela and Shankarabharana Raga. So Hanuma Todi Mela and Todi Raga. That is the most accurate name of way of saying, referring to those. So Dhira Shankarabharana Mela has the notes Shadja, Chatushruti Rishabha, Antaragandhara, Shuddha Madhyama, etc. Sa Re Ga Ma Pa Da Ni Sa, as you would play it in a harmonium, right? So that is the Dhira Shankarabharana Mela, but it doesn't have the life and blood of Shankarabharana Raga. So coming to the Katapayadi, Venkatamaki did not care. He did not even no, he did not. He just said, okay. He says, okay, 72. If you get a chance to read Chaturgandi Prakashika, if you haven't, I suggest. It's a very small book. It has like 6 chapters. It is about maybe 50 pages long. If in plain translation, 50 pages of whatever language you are reading, unless you go for a long elaboration of notes. Okay, and then in that, all this Mela Prakarana is just one Prakarana. And then he describes this system of permutations and combinations and how it will create 72. He also says even if Shiva comes, he cannot create more than 72 Melas given these swaras. After saying that, then he says, okay, in my scheme, the raga, he says, okay, there are 19, and I'm going to describe what melas are, what ragas are present now. Then he will say, okay, the raga called Samavarali falls in the third place. He says the Mukhari falls in the first place. Samavarali falls in the third place. And then Bhupala, there was probably, Todi was not very famous or whatnot. He takes the raga Bhupala, which is not even a full Sampurna raga. He calls it the Bhupala Mela. So the Bhupala Mela has the swaras of Hanumatodi, but Bhupala Raga has Sarigapadasa. So that is how he describes it. And then he goes to Vasanta Bhairavi, Malavagola, and then and so on. Sri Raga Mela for 22, and then Kamboji Mela for 20. Not Kamboji, Kedar Gaula. I think Kedar Gaula Mela for 28, Shankarabharana, etc. etc. That is how he gives. And coming to Kalyani, whether his Kalyani was same as ours, there is a thought that the Kalyani of those times actually might have looked like a bit like our Mohana Kalyani, because I think in Sangeet Saramrita of Tulaja, there is a raga called the description for, which is just before Tyagaraja. The description for Kalyani sort of looks like, skips Ma and Neen, Aroha and something like that, which might make it like somewhat like Mohana Kalyani. But I think we do not have any compositions of that time. Although the raga is mentioned by other musicians, I do not know which is the earliest example of examples of compositions in Kalyani. Kamala Jadala is definitely, people say it is Purandara Dasa's. It might be, it may not be. I cannot really say with certainty. But it's very likely it was composed by somebody in Karnataka, because he refers to Velapura or Beluru, what we call as Beluru today, Velapura Surottama. So it's probably done by a composer who was in Karnataka. But we cannot really tell whether it was Purandaradasa himself. But the traditional belief is that all the Balapathas were created by Purandaradasaru. So, but it is possible that it might have been anywhere between 1550 to 1750. In that time, it was composed. Namaste Jayatirthi. Do you have a comment?
ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ ಸರ್. ನಮ್ದೊಂದು ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಇದೆ.
ಹೇಳಿ.
ಇವಾಗ ಪ್ರಿವಿಯಸ್ಲಿ ಹಿಂದೂಸ್ತಾನಿ ಅಂಡ್ ಕರ್ನಾಟಿಕ್ ಬೋತ್ ಮ್ಯೂಸಿಕ್ ವೇರ್ ಸೇಮ್ ಸ್ಟಡಿ ಇನ್ ಥಿಯರಾಟಿಕ್ ಥಿಯರಿ.
ಹೌದು.
ಯಾವಾಗ ಸೇಮ್ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಲೇಟರ್ ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅದು ಚೇಂಜ್ ಆಯ್ತು. ಅಂಡ್ ದೇರ್ ಆರ್ ಸೋ ಮೆನಿ ರಾಗಾಸ್ ಮಾಲ್ಕೌನ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ ಹಿಂದೂಸ್ತಾನಿ ಇಂಡೋಲಮ್ ಇನ್ ಕರ್ನಾಟಿಕ್. ಹೆಸರುಗಳು ಚೇಂಜ್ ಆಗಿದೆ, ಅದು ಯಾವ ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಆಗಿದೆ ಅಂತ
ಹೆಸರುಗಳು ಒಂದೇ. It's quite common, just to see. I'll answer in English for reaching out other people who may not understand Kannada. So the question was, when did these two streams split out, Hindustani and Karnataka Sangeeta, and how did the changes in raga names occur? For example, why is Hindola called Malkauns and so on? So this is the split. We can say it happened sometime after the 12th century, 12th to 13th century. It started probably by 15th to 16th century it was complete. So it was not a one-day process. It took quite some time. In the early 16th century, Pandarika Vittala, who hailed from near Bangalore, he was from a place called Satanur near Magadi. He wrote three different books on music. Sadraga Chandrodaya, Ragamala, and one more, Nartana Nirnaya, I think. So here he has written about different systems. He also tells he's adept in both the northern and the southern varieties of music, as well as the Persian music. He tells specifically Parasika music, and he also gives examples of names of the ragas, what it is called in Parsi music and what it is called in our music, and so on. And then uh, some of the names I know may have got influenced by Persian music, and I know that's how the name got changed. So in some cases, for example, the raga Kalyani itself, right? It's as far as we can say, it is a influence from Persian music into Indian music. It didn't exist in with us before, and that is probably a reason why Venkatamaki called it Pamarana Matipriya. It is not a high class raga or whatever it is. Um, so it came in the name Yaman itself is a take from the Persian word apparently, and the name Kalyana that was given in India is an equivalent of what the name Yaman meant in the original language. So we sort of took the raga, took the name also, and then called it Kalyana. And we all the same. It also was sort of spread with the original name too. So therefore, the name Yaman Kalyan, and Kalyana Kalyani. So all these different names existed in parallel, and how the ragas changing names is also quite common. It's not uh, something unheard of. Therefore, it's the same raga being called as Todi and Bhairavi. At some point of time, it changing the name, something getting stabilized in north, something getting stabilized in south. So that's all has happened over time. It's hard to tell when, but all these raga called Malava Kaushik Malkaus, it comes from a name called Malava Kaushika. So that name is attested in many of the works. So so hence even now in Hindustani you'll see, right, the same raga is called you have two names like Kaushika Dvani and Bhina Shadja. There are several such ragas. In Carnatic Sangeet also there are ragas like Devamrita Varshini, and they also call it by the name, I'm forgetting it, Chittaranjini? No, not Chittaranjini. Mm, Nadachintamani. So there are names, there are ragas with the same raga is called by multiple names, and multiple ragas known by the same name, as I illustrated earlier, as Shuddha Saveri case. So this is the semantics and the name study. It's quite interesting, but we can definitely trace through the books that we have over the century, right? From the 12th century onwards, there are plenty of musical texts until today. So which will help us to trace these things. I can refer a very good book by, I think it's by Dr. Hema Ramanathan, Ragas in Karnataka Music or something is the book. It's a very good book that gives the name of the raga, which are the texts that particular name is found, what is the lakshana of that particular raga, and so on. It's a very encyclopedic work. So if you get a chance to lay your hands on that book, I think it's a good handbook for anybody who is interested in seriously in the names of the ragas and how they have changed, evolved over time. Thank you, Jaitikji.
Very nice information. Thank you. Even in Hindustani music, there are some ragas. Actually, in Carnatic Todi in Hindustani, that is Bhairavi scale is there. Right?
That's true.
So so in many ragas, for example, Asavari Todi we will call. It is Bhairavi scale only. Our Todi is different, but even though we will call Asavari Todi, Asavari, that is Komal Rishabh Asavari, we will call it as Todi.
Yep.
And no one knows why why we are calling it as Todi.
Yeah.
There is a different madhyama for Todi in Hindustani and in
Correct, correct, correct.
Todi and Bhairavi is correct. But still we are calling Sauri Todi.
That's true.
That's true.
Thank you.
So, Vidyaji, do you want to say something?
I just wanted to ask, what is this Grama Mochana? Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, Grama is the old system of music that was there, where the frame of reference was not always on the shedja, and uh, uh, the interval between notes, the nominal interval between notes was different. So, for example, the Shadja Grama looked like what we have today, but something, the Madhyama Grama, the Panchama Swara, what we call Sa, Pa, that Panchama Swara was actually at the place where we have the Pratimadhyama. Sa, Ma, so that would be actually Sa, Pa, so that is how it would have been. So it's a bit hard for us to envision how that looked, because we are so much used to used to the sa and pa that we use currently. But in that Madhyama Grama system, there were other, and Murchana is just like, Sarigama Padanisa Sanida Pamagarisa. This is the Murchana. The going up and down a scale is called Murchana. And then they can, the Murchana, they'll say Rishabhanti Murchana means it will go Rigama Padani Sari, Risanida Pamagari. Or if it's a Shadava Murchana, it will be Sarigama Panisa, Sani Pamagarisa. So that is what the definition was. In the Madhyama Grama definition, with the different swara intervals, the new ragas would have formed. Actually, in fact, there are, and then at some point of time, the two grammas merged into each other. So therefore, the notes that we were calling as something else before, they all got, the Madhyama became Shadja. The Madhyama Grama ragas always started with the Madhyama. So that is where it started. The Raga Madhyamavati we call now, it was called Madhyamadi before. That is because it came from Madhyama Grama, and the Raga actually started from Ma. And the Sanchara was Mapanisaga, not Sari Mapanisa. Mapanisa Ma, that is how it was. And then when it was normalized, it was pulled back into Shadja Grama, that became Sari Mapanisa. It's a bit complicated thing to illustrate without actually having to being able to sing of anything of Madhyama Grama. But the people have shown that Madhyama Grama ragas, some of those have given to ragas that have come into our system, like Chakravaka and so on. Basically, all the ragas that we have can come from what we call Grahabheda. So with the given system of now by changing the starting note, you can get into different scales, they will fill it, but it will not fill every possible combination. But some of those spaces in our 72 right now, they actually get filled because there are remnants from the Madhyama Grama. So a different Murchana Madhyama Gramas give rise to certain ragas that have come into our system, and then their Grahavedas give some new scales, and basically they have sort of populated the musical space. So that's what we can say. But because it is 2000 year old, we don't have any examples or compositions surviving all the way from then. It's a bit hard to envision. I hope it was, even if it was not very clear, I hope I gave a little insight.
No, actually, sir, I have much more clarity now than what I had. So my understanding as well was from reading whatever I could, score. It was that is similar to the Graha Vedam that we do and deriving new ragas from that. That was my understanding. In fact, I think you gave me a little more clarity than what I had. And yeah, like you say, right, there is no singing examples that are possible here. It's only through the text that is that I'm able to understand. That's why I wanted to ask you this question.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for that. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. The main thing is that the difference, the swara difference was there between the Panchama and Shadja, which is different from Shadja Grama. I think that is what is the characteristic difference. Otherwise, if it was just the change in the starting note, right, it's not going to phenomenal difference, right? It's just like shifted, but here it is not just shifted, but something more.
Right, right. And I think from what I've read, there is also this Shruti difference between each.
Yeah. That is the
Yeah.
that's the Ekashruti difference.
That is the base of the convention.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Surendraji, do you have something to say?
ಸರ್ ಗುಡ್ ಮಾರ್ನಿಂಗ್ ಟು ಆಲ್. ಗುಡ್ ಮಾರ್ನಿಂಗ್ ಸರ್. ನನಗೆ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕಾಣೋದೇನು ಅಂದ್ರೆ LBW ಲೋಬರ್ಟ್ ಬೇಬೀಸ್ಗೆ ಮ್ಯೂಸಿಕಲ್ ಥೆರಪಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಪಿಕಪ್ ಆಗ್ತಾರೆ ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಒಪಿನಿಯನ್ ಇದೆ. 40 ಡೆಸಿಬಲ್ ಒಳಗಿರ್ಬೇಕು ಅದು ಸೌಂಡ್ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಗಮನದಲ್ಲಿಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಯಾವ ರಾಗ ಸ್ಯೂಟೇಬಲ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದೊಂದು ಡೌಟ್ ಇದೆ ಸರ್ ನನಗೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಕಡೆ ಉತ್ತರ ಸಿಗುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಕಷ್ಟ ನನಗೆ, ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಕೇಳಿದೆ ಸರ್.
ಇದು
ಭಾವಿಸ್ಬೇಡಿ, ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಮಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಹೌ ಮಚ್ ದಿಸ್ ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಇಸ್ ರಿಲೆವೆಂಟ್ ಟು ದಿಸ್ ಟಾಪಿಕ್ ಐ ಡೋಂಟ್ ನೋ, ಐ ಆಮ್ ಅಫ್ರೈಡ್. ಓಕೆ ಸರ್.
ಅದು ಇದ್ರ ವಿಷಯ ನನಗೆ ಹೇಳಕ್ಕೆ ಏನೋ ಸಾಧ್ಯತೆ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಈ ಕೆಲವು ವಿಷಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಸಂಗೀತ ಮನುಷ್ಯರ ಮೇಲೆ ಪರಿಣಾಮ ಬೀರುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ನಿಜ. ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ ಹೇಗೆ ಅದು ನಮ್ಮ ಮಾತುಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ, ನಮ್ಮ ಬ್ರೈನ್ ಫಂಕ್ಷನ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಖಂಡಿತ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ನಮಗೆ ಕೆಲವು ಹಾಡುಗಳನ್ನ ಕೇಳಿದಾಗ ಮನಸ್ಸಿಗೆ ಸಂತೋಷ ಆಗೋದು, ಕೆಲವು ಹಾಡುಗಳನ್ನ ಕೇಳಿದಾಗ ದುಃಖ ಆಗೋದು ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಅನಿಸ್ಬೋದು. ಕೆಲವರಿಗೆ ಅದು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಕೆಲವರಿಗೆ ಅದು ಅಷ್ಟು ಆ ಮಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ ಆಗದೇ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಬೇಸ್ಡ್ ಆನ್ ದ ಸ್ವರ ಇಂಟರ್ವೆಲ್ಸ್ ದಟ್ ಯು ಸಿ. ಒಂದೊಂದು ಸ್ವರಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಮಧ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯ ಡಿಫ್ರೆನ್ಸ್ ಇದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಮೇಲೆ ಇಟ್ ಡಿಟರ್ಮಿನ್ಸ್. ಸೊ ಹೌ ವೆದರ್ ದ ನೋಟ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಕಾನ್ಸನೆಂಟ್ ಆರ್ ಡಿಸೊನೆಂಟ್ ಬಿಟ್ವೀನ್ ಈಚ್ ಅದರ್. So that determines whether you see something as a happy or sad or those kinds of emotions you can associate with ragas, even when you don't know any theory behind it. So hence, the point is, it does affect people, it does affect minds. I don't know whether it will affect, it can cure diseases or it can actually help something. But definitely, I feel positively that, you feel you react positive to certain things and you don't react so much positive to some other things when you listen to them. So that probably makes a difference. So there might be some placebo involved, but I don't know. For example, you associate certain things with early morning, some ragas based on your cultural bring-up. You might associate it something with sadness by your cultural bring-up. For example, a raga like Hindustani Todi, they always play when some dignitary has died or something. They play that, and people, without knowing, they would have understood. They would have sort of associate that with death and mourning and so on, even without knowing. So people, therefore, when they listen to that, they feel up or down based on their cultural context as well. But even without that cultural context, some intervals are more uplifting than others between the notes. So that will definitely make a difference on your brain. It's a partial answer, but I hope it was somewhat useful.
Thank you so much, sir. I'd like to request anybody in this room can having more knowledge about that. Please guide me, sir. That is not my request. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your information.
Sure. Behzad ji, do you want to go next? Is there a question?
Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. Actually, at least here from. There is one thing that I wanted actually to basically mention and ask. Basically, is my background is Persian, so I came from like a Persian background, but I studied classical music. And then after many years of studying classical music and harmony in classical music, I then went to study jazz music. And I ended up finding modal music and modes in jazz music. I mean, the modes that jazz musicians using a lot, and figure out how those harmonies working on those modes when jazz musicians using them. Then, because of my background, I went to study. Sorry, is there anything?
No. Please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Because of my background, then I went to study basically Persian music. And as you know, I'm sure that all of you know that Persian music are having the same system, the same modal system as Raga that we have in Persian. We call them Daska, and you call them Raga. And because of my background studied in jazz and classical music, I tried to figure out how much they can really meet each other. I mean, the modes that we have in jazz music and the modes that we have in Persian music, how much they can really meet each other, and what about the intervals that in jazz music we do not have? And I mean, I took them apart, and like the quarter tones, microtonal tones that we have in Persian music, which I'm sure you got in Raga as well. If you are taking those microtonal tones out of the equation, we ending up with modes. Now, some of these modes are really overlapping with the jazz musician modes, like for example Lydian or augmented Lydian modes that we have in Persian music. I'm sure you have it in Raga as well. And then I thought that our music supposed to be like a modal music in Persia. And I think Raga is also, when I studied a little bit about Indian music and Raga, I thought that this is exactly the same. It's like a modal music. We are really thinking about modes changing, and when we are modulating, we are changing modes basically, and we are transposing modes from one part of our instrument to another part of another instrument. Well, these are just to let you know the background that I come from. Now, my question is, what I am trying nowadays to study and what I'm trying nowadays to incorporate into my research is that why that during the last 2,000 years, I mean, Indians as well as Persians, we have that sort of complex as well as complete modes that we have and be playing on our instrument. And why did we, I mean, I should say, why didn't we started to incorporate harmonies and harmonizing our melodies, and like exactly the way that jazz musicians did harmonize their melodies on piano, or they having big bands. And what is hindering and what is the obstacle that Indians and Persians are not really trying to harmonize their music and really trying actually to get a better big band out of their music and being able to present our music. When I say our music, I mean totally the modal music that we have in Persia, which have really similarities in Ragas. What is the obstacle, do you think, that we have, or we have had, or we will have, to not let our harmony, I mean, be more like concise and be more like presentable to the world? Thank you for giving me that time to ask this question. I'm finished.
Sure. Thanks, Bezal. I think you have a great background to understand Indian music with your jazz plus Persian music. I think the reason I don't think it as a shortcoming of Indian or Persian music not to have gone the harmonic way, because I think it's more wholesome and to my ears, to more wholesome and more complete systems of music. Yeah, not that I have less regard for the harmony in music, Western music, but the thing is, they might have been because of the types of instruments that we developed. If you see, both in India and Persia, the string instrument, what we call veena, and I think it was called lyre or whatever. There were similar instruments in Persia, I'm very sure. What arose as like the sarod and similar things in India, veena. Basically, the instruments that have strings and that are played with wind rather than with keys, and where you can slide your notes. I think this is what sort of developed into our complex system of gamakas that we have in India. I know that Persian music also has some similar kind of thing. I mean, I've heard some of the ragas played in Persian style, which are very close to what they're performed in Indian system, like Basant Mukhari, etc., which are some particular maqams that came in during that time, the Hijaz. Those are all have come in the 12th, 13th, 16th century, and then they have got mainstreamed, and they changed somewhat,
but still they are very much part of Indian music. So I think having not having the harmony as the main part is not a drawback in my opinion, and I think it's just a question of how what kind of vocal and what kind of instruments that the systems had that led to these things. I mean, this is just like me loudly thinking, not with a lot of study on that.
Thank you very much. There is one thing that I always keep talking about it in my clubs and here even in clubhouse and anywhere that I can. There is something that I always thinking that because our microtonal music as well as those instruments hasn't had really played together as a group, and we didn't present that sort of dissonant notes and dissonant sounds that sometimes we're getting when we are harmonizing our music and melodies, and we haven't presented. I mean, we didn't take that effort to really put them together and trying to build chords upon those scales and those doesn't matter if it is ragas or if it is like Persian modes, and because this is something jazz players did a lot, and they sounding dissonance actually. If you are thinking about jazz music, lots of chords, lots of melodies that they are playing, they sound dissonant, but during the times that they represented the same dissonant sounds and people listen to that dissonant sounds a lot, and now those dissonant sounds become interesting for most of the words. And this is, I think, that's something that we, as I was at Persian, and I think also Indian, because we have lots of similarities, Indian didn't attempt to do that. And if we trying actually to put like two, three, four, five, six instruments together, if it is a string instrument or doesn't matter any sort of instrument, woodwind instrument together, and trying to build chords and put intervals on top of each other vertically rather than horizontally. This is something that will get our music even more like presentable to the world, and as a world music would really improve our presentation and our existence inside the whole world music societies. And this is something that I keep working on, and music, building chords upon that, like scales, and doesn't matter if it is called scales mode raga or daska in Persian. If we're trying to put chords and build chords upon those intervals, I think we will end up having a new sounds coming out of our music that is more like presentable. And this is something that I was wondering if it's something that is of your interest or not, and that was the question. And thank you again. And I'm finished.
Yeah,
I would like to add something here.
Yeah, please go on.
I have, yeah, actually, I have two things I would like to add. So, in the other forms of music where Behzad Saab was talking about, in some forms of music, we judge the music or tend to interpret it by the notes we hear and the combined effect those notes give. But Carnatic music or any Hindustani music is from a Bhakti tradition. So we kind of believe in simplicity. I'm not saying holding a seventh or a ninth or an 11th will spoil the Bhakti factor, but our roots are different, and somewhere we have to maintain the originality. See, if we have, why do we call jazz music jazz music? Because it has a certain chording, it has complex chords, it has complex patterns. So that is how jazz music is characterized. And if we kind of tend to bring in the concepts and have dissonant notes, somewhere we will lose the identity of our own music. I'm not saying it's wrong to improvise, but at the same time, so that is one thing I would like to say, because we have to somewhere keep the identity of all forms of music. And one more thing is, we actually, there has been a slight concept of harmonies have not been completely ruled out of Carnatic music, because rarely when the alapana is being sung, alap is an elaboration of any particular scale. So when the vocalist is singing, the violinist has at times held a parallel fifth note or a third note, and that it has created wonders on stage. So we have also kind of believed in harmonies, but we have not. It's not that we can't
we don't have the potential to do it. It's because we just stay away from it, because it's important to maintain Carnatic music as Carnatic music. So that is very important.
Yes, Karthik and Bezad. I think I tend to agree with mostly whatever Karthik said, and we don't have to actually to present to a world stage. We don't have to change our own character, be it Indian or Persian. We can present as it is, and we don't. I don't think somebody will change Beethoven playing a Beethoven or something else for because they are playing in Asia, right? So I think that part I think should be ruled out. But I think a limited amount of harmony does exist. And the other thing is I don't agree that the group performances were not in at least in India they were definitely there. As early as in Natya Shastra 2200 years ago, they talk about ensembles made of multiple instruments and multiple singers. So there used to be different venas. Venas are like the string instruments. There were multiple rhythm instruments. There were multiple singers, and there were flutes, multiple flutes. So it talks about all that. So there were groups of instruments, but I think it did not really come to their they probably didn't think harmony and creating chords was the thing for them. Might have been. So that's how I can say.
Right. There is just one more question that I would like to ask regarding the thing that you just said. Is it then a necessary? I mean, is it then a necessity to evolve the music, or no? We should embrace it as it is, and we should keep doing it as it is, or is it the necessity? I mean, because when we are studying what are the difference between raga and a scale, or what are the difference between modes and scale on raga or daska in Persian, is it because there is a necessity to evolve it, or is it because just to let others know about the study behind it? This is the last question.
Yeah, I think the evolution happens naturally and it cannot be forced. So whether it is whether certain things can be introduced into the raga in a different context, it all happens by nature. Sometimes it's like a composer adds a foreign note. Sometimes he doesn't intentionally do, but it creeps in the playing of people. And somehow, if it sounds good, then that gets into that particular composition, and then that gets formulated into the grammar of the raga, and then therefore, after 50 years, that raga is a full-fledged usage of that extraneous note. That wasn't there. So it is not that it's not done with an intention, but it just evolves. That's with minor changes here and there. And then when you make a drastic change, people will think that okay, this is then they no longer associate it with that particular raga at all. So it looks a totally different creature, different raga. Or they'll say in Hindustani there is a good way of doing it. When such things are introduced, they'll just call it mishra. Mishra means mixed. So they'll say okay, they're singing Shivaranjani, they introduce a new note, they'll call it Mishra Shivaranjani, Mishra Pahadi. So lots of this type of things. But in general, none of these Mishra ragas are used to be a main composition in a concert. But they will just put it towards the end and a small bhajan, something, a small tukda, what we call, small piece only, but not as a major element in the presentation of a raga. Hardik, do you have something?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for the session. So my question is we have this Madhyama Graha Raga, right? So it is similar to Madhyama Shruti. We turn on Madhyama Shruti, we play in tambura, and afterwards we sing
No, it's not just that. As I said, the Madhyama Grama Shruti, this one, the Murchana would start from Ma, but the Panchama is not at the Panchama of our position, but it is at Shruti lower, meaning it is at what we call the Pratimadhyama. That is where the Panchama of that particular system would stand. So it's really sort of hard for us to think of that, because the Pa is standing at a different place. The Swara intervals between your Ga and Ma and Pa is different now. So sa re ga ma ma. So this is how two madhyamas next to each other will sound. Sa re ga ma pa. So that is how it would sound. And then with it sounds very odd to us just because we are not used to hear those that interval, and that was the basic of the framework of the Madhyama Krama.
Right, thank you, sir. And one more question: this we have this Ragam and Chittaranjani, right?
Chittaranjani, yeah. Mm-hmm.
We have one compound harmonic combination by Raga. So
Mm-hmm.
in that we only do from Sati Gama Pada Nida Pa Magadi Sa. So we don't go beyond Sa. We don't go to
Yeah. Yeah.
So can you please explain about that?
Yeah, these are called generally limited. I think earlier, if you were there, if you weren't there, I think I talked about these elements of a raga, where mandra is an element of a raga where it tells how low you go. Tara is the limit where until where you can go. So this raga is limited. It's just a madhyastha. So riga ma padani sa nida pa ma ga re sa. It's basically Kalahara Priya, but it is limited in range, right? So that is how the whole composition is, and in this one, to be truthful, this was composed with a different swara. The Chittaranjani, as envisioned by Tyagaraja, was sa re ga ma pa da ni. So it had the Shuddha Nishada, but over time the Shuddha Nishada has changed to Kaishiki Nishada, and therefore it has sort of become equivalent to a limited range Kalahara Priya. We have such similar ragas. For example, if you see Nadanama Kriya, right? Nadanama Kriya, and then Janjoti. These are all ragas that will stop at certain place. The Sariga Mapada Nida Pamagari Sa Nida Padasa, right? Magari Sa Nida Pa. So you won't go beyond that swara for that particular raga.
So that means that Nadanama Kriya, like Nishadanti Raga, Devatanti Raga means stopping in that note.
Yes.
That tone.
Yes.
Okay. Am I correct, sir, in that?
Yeah, that's correct. Nishadanti Raga will not have sanchara over the mandras and then the madhyasthayi nishada. It doesn't have beyond that. A Panchamanti Raga, which is like Sita Kalyana Vaibhavani, right? Navaroj or Kuranji. These all are our Panchamanti Daivatanti Ragas.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for the insight. It was so beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hardik. Prithviraj, do you have something to say?
Something to what, sir?
Good morning, sir. Thank you so much for this session. So I have two questions here. One is how would we explain and justify sentence for both Arab and Devadan? I used to have this doubt from many years. They both sound similar and look similar, but why does it has two names and why it has grown up in two different ways?
No, that is just because the way the raga flows is different. This is how the gate of Devgandhari goes. But in Arabic, it's Rima pa mayari, the pa mayari, sira pa mayari. So the me, it's very fleeting. Ga is very fleeting. So very alpa. So what we call as alpa in our terminology. So therefore, even though the nominal scale being same doesn't really mean anything. So that's why some of these ragas, the scale doesn't mean anything. For example, Ananda Bhairavi being the sa ga re ga ma pa da pa sa, but there are sancharas that go beyond this. It's not defined by the sancharas. So there are many ragas that are not limited by the sancharas, by the scale, but based on the sancharas that they take.
Yes, sorry, sir. Actually, I wanted to ask another set of ragas. I got confused with their similarity in the pronunciation. I wanted to ask about Averi and Karnataka Devagandhari.
Yeah, that is something different because Averi originally supposedly had the Shuddha Devata, and this at some point of time somebody changed the Shuddha Devata into Chatushruti Devata and started singing Nagu Momo, and it got popular. But there was already a raga called Deva Gandhara with the same set of scales, which is similar to Hindustani Bhimpalas. And because of there being another Deva Gandhari, they called it Karnataka Deva Gandhari. So the Karnataka Deva Gandhari is not a old name. So but to begin with, Abheri was slightly different. But now, if you look at it, Abheri and what we call Karnataka Deva Gandhari are identical. But like Muthuswami Dikshita's composition, Veena Bheri is sung often with the Shuddha Devata, how it was supposed to be sung.
Yes, sir. And I too even heard a very rare recording of Nagu Momo of Tyagaraja Swami with Shuddha Devatam.
Yeah, there are some performers doing that.
So can we also now implement that kind of Shuddha Devatam version of Abheri now with the Nagu Momo and all?
Yeah, I mean, there is nobody preventing us, right? And actually, you are not doing anything wrong. You are trying to bring it to the original form or the old form of that particular song. It's left to now people, all right, the listeners, to accept it or not. Sometimes they might find different, and then sometimes they'll say, okay, yeah, because this is whether we like the new version or not. This is how the composer originally envisioned it, and we should sing it. So that is one way to look at it.
Let me ask my second question. Yes, sir. So recently I learned Riti Kaula Vardam, and in that I found a phrase like so the da is like in Kaishika Nisharan place. So but still we sing it as Daivatam. So can you explain more about?
No, that is there in most of our ragas. So the nominal position and how we sing. That's why it's very hard for someone to play it in a keyboard given just the notation. For example, it's just possible to show a raga with a single note. I mean, it may sound very this one, but if I sing this, it's almost certain that I'm going to sing Shahana. So therefore, the note being at certain place or having a certain gamaka or being elevated, they're all part of the grammar of the raga. If you look at a raga like Kedara, Samagama Panisa Sani Pa Magari Sani Pa. Sometimes the ni is at the position of da, pani pama, pani pama. We say this. Pani pama. If you look at it, it's actually saying pada pama, right? It's actually saying pada pama and very briefly touching the ni. It's not even touching the real ni position. Sani pani pama gari sa. So these are all how the raga has developed, and we keep that, and that's why you without knowing a particular raga, if you just listen not at all knowing the raga, if you want to sing something like in Riti Gaula, Ananda Pauravi, Neelambari, or any of these ragas, it's very hard. Or Todi, for example, if somebody doesn't know the raga Todi, and if they are given a notation of so they are totally going to mess it up, right? Sa ni da pa da ni da pa ma pa ga ma ni da pa ma ga ri sa ri ga ma pa da ni. So it doesn't really sound like sa ri ga ni sa ri da ni sa ma da ni. Here at least it's better, but pa ma ga ri sa. So the moment you sing pa ma ga ri sa, it totally loses the Todi character. So that's why all these this is, I think we come back to what makes a raga different from the scale, because it is.
Can I also? Yeah. So lastly, I just want to conclude with that. So if some of the audience does not know about these characteristics of, like, example, Riti Gaula, Daivatam and all, so is there a chance? I mean, so definitely there there is a chance of thinking about the artist or the performer that he is using apaswaram and like that. So we need to even educate listeners as well. Is it sir?
I don't think. I don't think people who know about the raga already know about it, right? People who don't know, they don't know how it should sound, right? They don't know, but they are there just to because it sounds pleasant. So for them, it doesn't really matter whether you are saying pada, pama, or pani, pama. It hardly matters to them. But as long as it sounds pleasant, they are good about that, right? So for example, and if somebody is listening to a instrumental rendition, they don't know whether you are singing pada, pama, pani, pama. You don't know. For the instrumentalist, they are both same, right? So, and for a lay listener who doesn't know Swarajnana, so they don't understand that, but they enjoy that, right? And there are actually like 10 times more people who enjoy music without actually knowing what is being played, and that is the beauty, and I think that is what brings all of us here together. So there are more people who can enjoy music than people who can sing and analyze and all that. These are all secondary things. I think the major thing is actually to be able to listen to music and perceive it as music and enjoy it. I think that's where the rasa sits.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, actually, I think right now we have come to the a kind of answer to what Mr. had initially asked, the question of harmony. So there is an inherent problem with harmony trying to be incorporated in our music. The reason is our music is not based on just static note positions, right? So the proportion, if you have a Carnatic concert or Hindustani, or I suspect even a Persian or Arabic Makam based system also, there is a performance. The proportion of time in which the performer stays at one particular frequency. I'm using the word frequency especially because the word note can have multiple meanings. So the proportion of time in which the note stays at one particular frequency is very limited compared to a Western, the classical music, or even for jazz for that matter. In jazz, there are modulations, but they're just an additional ornamentation, right? But in the Indian context or in the Oriental context, it is like that is the major crux of our music. So the identity of the raga or the emotion or whatever is meant to be conveyed through music, that is mainly in the movements or the sanchara as we call it. So it's a movement based music. It's not a positional music. That is the main thing. So it's a movement based music with respect to a fundamental shadja or the fundamental note. So that basic definition is where the difference comes in. So that is when it becomes very hard to implement a harmony, because harmony according to our present understanding is uh, essentially adding another note. So it's introducing another static pitch, right? So let's say a raga like Todi. If you listen to Todi, like you will find that at no point, basically, except the sa, the shadja or the panchama, at no point you can introduce a harmonic note. Where will you cannot introduce it at ga, obviously. Ma also you cannot, because at most of the points where ma is used also, there is a modulation. There are heavy gamkas that are there. So that is a fundamental problem, because you cannot, if you introduce a harmony in gamaka based music or movement based music, you cannot ensure that it will remain harmonious, because there has to be certain pitch relations, right? There are some mathematical frequency relations that have to be met in order for that to sound harmonious. But if the performer does not stay at that note for more than a perceivable amount of time, then we cannot actually introduce that. And whether we need to force the harmony on the music is another question, because the fundamental aim of music, as Hamsanandi sir had previously told, was basically to please the listener's ears, right? So the listener's ear does not, like, if a child or someone who's totally isolated from any forms of music, it's someone who's got his hearing for the first time. If he listens to music, he does not search whether there are these harmonious notes or not. He does not do a Fourier transform. For those who are familiar with all that,
he does not do all that. He just listens to that and what is the emotion. So the emotion is what is getting conveyed. So emotion is best conveyed through movement. So being that as the fundamental of the Eastern music, I wouldn't generalize it. I know that it is for Carnatic music. That is where the prospect of harmony being introduced is it's not just tedious, but it might seem unnecessary.
That was a good elaboration, Arvind. I think it's very.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So, thank you for the explanation. There is one thing that I was going to ask is if there are two like instrumentalists playing the same raga and without harmony and simultaneously playing the same raga, if we are changing the moment and that we are holding one note, I mean it doesn't matter one note, and if we are changing that tune a little bit higher or lower by our emotion and feeling it, can two or three instrumentalists with the same instrument play the same raga at the same time simultaneously or not? If you are really if changing that tune at the moment, and even one note, if you are going a little bit higher, a little bit lower, I mean in terms of the sense, if you are thinking going 20 cents higher, 20 cents lower, or 10 cents higher, 10 cents lower, is it the music capable of having two instrumentalists playing the same raga, the same music at the same time without really interfering to each other or not? This is one question that raised when you talked about this. Thank you.
So there, I think I have an answer there.
What you're saying, I think what you meant is the microtonal differences that might be there, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but again, it's much more complicated than that because microtonal difference. That's when you're looking at a static pitch, right? Static pitch does not mean that it has to be C or C sharp or things like that. Anything in between. So any real number in between, if you look at the mathematical point of view, right? Any fraction in between, that if kept for a perceivable amount of time, that is also a static pitch. So it's not just in the frequency variation; it's in the complete movement. So what I'm describing the movement word a bit more because that is the crux of the difference, the fundamental difference. Movement is there in frequency as well as time, right? So in the pitch variation there will be, of course, that is a problem. That is a problem even if you keep the note static for a certain amount of time. There will be the microtonal differences, right? What is an even more important thing or more difficult problem would be the movement across time. So in a gamaka you are changing the frequency with respect to time. So it's like plotting a graph. It's not just one certain point. So there is a curve. So that if the two curves don't exactly match, it should match both in the pitch as well as the time. So in our music or in Carnatic music, we don't have any limitations on both. The only thing is it should follow a certain pattern with respect to the raga. So this abstraction, that is where the problem is. Definitely the microtonal differences are there, but we have to look into the time movements as well. So the movement phrase that I use is with respect to both pitch as well as the time.
To add to what Arvind already said, there is one more thing there. The point is, although the microtonal variations or whatever, right? Two instrumentalists they do different things. It's although there is flexibility, it doesn't mean it can wildly oscillate about something beyond. There is a limit for each of these variations, depending on the raga, depending on the context, how wide you may be able to go, how less, how wide, how long, how short. All these are sort of tied to the grammar. So therefore, if two instrumentalists are playing, they can superimpose on each other very well, and they can play together. That is not a problem. But they will not be wildly different in the treatment of notes between them. So the gamakas will have to be kept in the similar on a similar plate, so to say. So hence,
this is exactly what I meant. I mean, if there is any possibility that two instrumentalists playing the same raga, the same melody, but without really interfering, I mean, in terms of the timing, I mean, is there a specific reason?
No, they can do that. They can do that, right? Because they can be actually elaborating in different parts of the raga too. two instrumentalists are doing. Someone plays the next one is playing the so and then that is wholesome if you are singing ga ma pa da ni sa ma ni da. So it's possible that they play the same thing, they play complementary notes, but all within the structure of the raga. So and some of these are actually consonant notes. They're somewhat harmonious depending on what raga they are playing. So it's also possible they arrange in such a way that there are situations where they appear harmonious, but I don't think that is necessary for a wholesome experience of Indian music. It can be given as a what you call a small frill, but it's not the main thing.
So there's one point I'd like to clarify here, Bezad, Hamsanandi sir. See, the problem when it comes to Carnatic music or Indian music, when you're making a tonal shift, we call it Graha Bedam. There is a theoretical concept called Graha Bedam which we use. Now, the fundamental problem which arises when someone does a tonal shift, let's say there are two instrumentalists, one of them is playing at taken normal scale, and one of them shifts it a scale above. The problem is it results in a conflict. Initial ragam itself, there's a possibility of change. For example, let's take a very fundamental example.
Manjunath, I don't think he is talking about shifting the whole scale. I think he's the way I understood is taking harmony notes only. I mean, it's not like shifting the scale. I don't know if I understood.
Actually, let me clear myself. Actually, the thing is, I was thinking because you said that we are actually it was Aravind, I think, said that we are changing the time and the frequency by the feel of like the instrumentalist actually. So he might decide when to change the frequency. He might decide when to go to another even note from inside the same scale or inside the same raga. If we are playing, and well, improvisation is something else, but is this possible? Because always we see that there is one instrumentalist actually playing the music. Is this possible to? Is this anything like we can have written rhythm and written like notes, like to be able to have 2, 3, 4 instrumentalists just play the same line and play the same line of music and just amplify it. Disregard the harmony. Just think about amplification of the sound of the music with 2 instruments, 3 instruments. But is it keeping the same feel, keeping the same emotion, or not? If you are having written rhythm and having written notes, and they are all need to follow, is it going to ruin that emotion that you are talking about, or not? This is what my question is.
I mean, there are such compositions, but and they have been specifically written, specifically performed. I don't say they aren't there, but they are not the staple. I mean, maybe Karthik can add something.
Yes. So, how we see in Carnatic music or any forms of Indian music, okay, let's take a concert platform. I will present something, a song is called a Kriti in Carnatic music. So, a Kriti will have probably 1,000,000 phrases with 1,000,000 oscillating frequencies and with 1,000,000 gamakas. Okay, it is practically impossible for me to sit with my violinist and whoever the other string, I think violin is the only string instrument probably. So I sit with my violinist and say, I'm going to be singing these 1,000,000 gamakas, you have to play exactly in sync with me, and I don't even see a benefit of that because the violinist will have his own time to showcase his own, because there is no need to do for us to play everything together, because I will sing my interpretation of a raga. Let the violinist sing his interpretation of the same gamaka, so that shines more within the grammar. So it's also about first of all, it's not practically possible as because in Western music we have a set side, we have a standard notation, right? We have C, we have D, we have E, we have F. We don't have any other fixed. We don't have microtones, or we don't have frequencies in between E and F. We don't say anything. But in Carnatic music, we have a concept called Shruti, right? Which is like the unknown frequencies which a gamma can hit and come. So it's all very complicated. It's practically impossible, and it's not necessary also.
Yeah, yeah, that is what I was trying to
Thank you
drive.
for clarification.
Yeah.
I didn't know that there are some like like notes that are not predefined in the scale or in the raga. It seems
No,
that
no,
there are
No,
some
the
like
notes are predefined.
The notes, what I meant is every raga has a standard set of notes, but the way of executing and looking it in the Carnatic way is slightly different. For example, we have Todi. Okay, like Hamsandi sir told, it's Re Ga Ma Pa Da Ni Sa Sa Ni Da Pa Ma Ga Re Sa. But the phrases which I do, ta ra na na. So this is the phrase in Todi. Right. So the phrase which I was singing in Todi was ta ni re sa ni da. This was only the phrase, but if you might see this phrase on a microscopic level, it's just like ta na na na. It is going somewhere. Okay, let's not jot down where it is going. It is supposed to go up to re, but it's up to the mentality and the mood of that artist. The artist on that day decides where that swara will go. It will be within the grammar, but that frequency can be here and there. So let that to maintain. So if only if that originality is there in every performance, then the music will shine.
That's what makes every performance, even by the same singer of the same composition, little different every time. So that's why we don't follow that system of looking at the notation and keeping to that. But having said that, yeah, as a novelty, such compositions have been done specifically for instrumentals. There have been many such done on AR and others too. Um, Okay, so I think we have exhausted almost all of the things that we wanted to talk about today, and I would like to thank you all for having come here and have contributed to this talk. And it was great to see you and interact with you all. I hope it was useful for some of the people who are getting introduced to music. This is you can take it like a 101 to introduction to Indian music, classical music, and the more Indian music is more about listening and enjoying it, and then going to maybe the learning phase. So I would like to thank you all for coming here. So unless if anybody has a last minute comment, I will. Yes.
Sir, just I want to add.
Yeah.
There is a possibility of harmony in Hindustani music, Indian music. Pandit Hari Prasad Chaurasia, along with Pandit Rupa Kulkarni and Pandit Rakesh Chaurasia, he has performed Impala Se Rag Jod with harmony.
Yeah. I mean that's what.
You can find it. You can find it on YouTube.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I mean, such limited experiments happen, but it's not. It's more like an exception rather than the rule. That's what I wanted to tell. So, thank you all for coming here. And it was, I just created this room on a whim today, and I see great participation, and there was a lot of good discussions too. Thank you, everyone. And good night.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Wherever you are.
Keep on doing such things.
Yeah.
We can get something.
Definitely. I hope
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I hope to.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Feeling blessed, sir. Thank you.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಕೈಲಿ ಈ ಮಾತು ಕೇಳಿ ಬಹಳ ಸಂತೋಷ ಆಯ್ತು ನನಗೆ. ನೀವು ಯಾವಾಗ ನಾವು ಬರೀ ಟಿವಿಲಿ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇರ್ತೀವಿ, ಆದ್ರೆ ಇವಾಗ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿ ಬಹಳ ಖುಷಿ ಆಯ್ತು.
Thank you, sir.
ಆಯ್ತು, ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ. ಶುಭರಾತ್ರಿ.
Discussions in the evening sometime. I think this will continue, right? It's very beneficial to all of us. It's a very technically sound discussion, I think.
Yeah, we'll probably have another session in a few days, and we can actually have something very specific, and then it'll be maybe an ongoing feature too. So right now I would like to say good night, good morning, and have a nice day.
Sure.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir, for answering all our questions. Thank you so much. It was so insightful.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I will close the room in 1, 2, 3. Thank you.